A very good morning and welcome to this edition of TV47 Breakfast. My name is Freddie Ndimuli. Don't worry, Anodida is around and she'll be here later on for matters relationship, today being a Wednesday. But before that, of course, you know how we do. We take a look at the newspapers, the big headlines, the big discussions, and of course, the World Cup. With me this morning is Daniel Manduku, member of the National Assembly. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Fred.
And I'm sure you must have watched the World Cup yesterday, France versus Spain.
I was a bit disappointed. I still believe that the penalty was unfair. I thought that gave France some demotivation and eventually lost. But I'm hoping to see my team lift the cup, and that is England.
England?
Yes.
So you're hoping that it will be Spain versus England?
I know it will be Spain versus England. I know England are going in as underdogs, but then I love the British, so you forgive me for that.
Of course, the second semi-final, Argentina versus England, plays tonight, and that's a big one. Spain already in the finals of the World Cup 2026. Who will join them there? Of course, there's a third-place playoff between now France and whoever loses today's game, but we'll have to wait for tonight to know who that will be. We're still hoping that other panelists will be joining us later as we continue the show. But a quick look at the dailies this morning. Too little, too late. That's the standard. And it talks about this report by the Kofi Annan Foundation that has already said there's about 87% chance of violence in next year's general elections. And that is the same story on the front page of the Daily Nation. A recipe for chaos. Kenya ranks second among 10 democracies at risk of electoral violence between 2026 and 2027. That's just how bad it is. They quote the Kofi Annan Foundation for this. It's the same story on the front page of the Taifa Leo. Wanasema mbele kuna shida. Yeah, this is exactly about a year and less than a month to the next general elections. And we are only worse than Nigeria. The other countries that are actually doing better include Colombia. Those countries do better than us in as far as how bad it would be if at all we return to what we saw in 2007. It is also less than 24 hours before the voters in Kalou go to the polls in this much anticipated by-elections, and that is where we'll start with this morning. So Daniel Manduku is an MP Nyaribari Masaba, and we start from here because some of the dailies talk about what we are seeing now and what we should be anticipating next year. And we're seeing everything that we are hoping not to see again. So the Standard says that tomorrow's Kalou by-election has become a chilling dress rehearsal for the 2027 general election, with voter bribery, violence, intimidation, and gun attacks exposing glaring failures by security agencies and the Electoral Commission. Everything that we are hoping not to see in an election or a by-election is happening in Kalou. Yes. Now, IEBC is promising a credible poll, but according to the Kofi Annan report, Kenya faces an 84.1% likelihood of electoral violence next year, raising fresh questions over whether institutions can prevent the country from sliding into another democratic crisis. But if I may just focus on the by-elections in Kalou tomorrow. The IEBC says they are very ready for everything and anything. Last week, the chairperson had even warned that he could be forced to delay or postpone the elections because of what was being witnessed there. Hours before the by-election, members of the DCP party, led by their leader, former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, already claiming that there are plans to rig the election. This is part of the stories covered here at TV47. Let's kick off with that.
Hours before voters in Kalou cast their ballots to elect their next member of parliament, former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has alleged a plot by the UDA party to rig the by-election, citing a meeting held on Monday in Gilgil that was allegedly attended by UDA officials, government officers, and political leaders. In a letter addressed to IEBC Chairperson Erastus Ethekon and Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja, Gachagua raises 15 issues that he says support his rigging claims. Gachagua alleges that IEBC is in collusion with UDA and has instructed presiding officers in DCP party strongholds to delay the opening of polling stations and push voting, counting and tallying into the night to create room for electoral malpractice. Gachagua further claims that with the concurrence of Ethicon, presiding officers will allow UDA supporters to be issued with 2 ballots instead of 1. He also alleges that the Monday meeting approved the deployment of plainclothes officers to cause disruption at selected polling stations and pose as agents. Gachagua further claims that UDA was in communication with Ethicon and agreed to delay the issuance of badges for DCP and other opposition candidates, a move he says would create a vacuum in the inspection of ballot boxes and monitoring of Kim's kits. Gachagua also alleges that Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja has deployed civilian police officers to interfere with the counting and tallying of votes. He claims a meeting involving 800 police officers was held in Ruringo, Nyeri, with 14 officers allegedly assigned to each polling station, 2 inside and others outside, to interfere with voting and tallying. Gachagua further claims that there is a plan to arrest young opposition supporters on Wednesday in order to deny them their right to vote, among other concerns. Gachagua has also questioned the silence of IEBC and Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja over alleged incidents, including the assault of DCP officials at Royal Garden Hotel in Kalou on 9th July, an alleged attack on the DCP campaign team by plainclothes officers on the same date, Saturday's attack on a DCP soundtrack by hooded gunmen, and Monday's alleged attempted assassination of Yala MP Kanini Kega. Apul Kamau, TV47.
Those are just some of the sentiments by some of the participants in tomorrow's by-election. The IEBC still insists they are ready to go in this by-election. So, whereas the mini polls would not ordinarily be a high-stakes affair, it has turned out to be an all-out rivalry as the government and the opposition eye next year's general election. What this paper is talking about, and that's why they say too little, too late, is some of the action taken by IEBC in at least appearing to punish some of those they feel have been engaging in electoral malpractice. One of them is Nakuru Town West MP David Gikaria. Nakuru Town East MP David Gikaria, who has been slapped with a 2.5 million shilling fine after being found guilty of violating the Electoral Code of Conduct. But Bwana Manduku, and that's a question we are asking, with all these problems, we had seen the IEBC chairperson last week say, if this thing continues like this, I may be forced to delay or postpone this election. Do you feel like probably that is what should have happened, given the fact that all we are seeing in Kalou are things that we should not be witnessing in a by-election?
Thank you, Fred, and good morning, viewers, once again. First, let me declare that I'm not a voter in Kalou, and any information that I may have or possess is based on what I've read. But then, Fred, what did you expect in a high-stakes by-election like this? And I like going back to history. We've been here before. Since the advent of multipartyism in the year 1992, we had several by-elections during the reign of former President Daniel Arap Moi. And I remember some of them. We had by-elections when some members of the opposition defected to Kano. People like Apiri Wawire, I remember, Burudi Nabuera. And the situation was similar. I think the reason is there's attention by political parties or political players to a particular by-election to prove a point. But the remedy is that the law is in place. We've got the Elections Act, we've got the Elections Code of Conduct, and if any party is aggrieved with the outcome, then there is a recourse. And normally that is the best way to do it, to deal with it, because once you have evidence that there was malpractice, then you go to court, the election court, and you prove your point. And luckily the election court has timelines. It's not something that is going to be prolonged. With the advent of the new constitution, these timelines were reduced. as happened in Bere North, you saw. So I think it's never an issue of do or die to me. But of course, given
Issues
that
around integrity of the process, do you
given
feel
that
like even the sentiments by the IBC chairperson himself bring to question the integrity of the process?
I think this is a moment that the chairperson of IBC, Erastus Ethekon, would have given confidence to Kenyans. He has the perfect golden chance to act as the law mandates him to do, not to cry hoof or to cry baby. And so the outcome of this election will greatly influence the perception that Kenyans have on the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission as it prepares itself for the next election. This will come and go.
How do you gauge their performance so far? We saw what happened in Bere. Now what we are witnessing.
I think given that it's a one by-election, it's just a one constituency, single constituency by-election, and given that they're supposed to conduct a simultaneous exercise in 290 constituencies and 1,450 wards and 47 counties, honestly, they have scored below 3%. Yeah, it's a total embarrassment. They should have done better. With one constituency, new commissioners, all the resources you have given them in parliament, this should not be the case. He cannot complain to the media that he can stop the elections. No, they say a tiger does not pronounce its tigritude. It pounces. We are yet to see any pounce from this man.
The biggest concern is that it's more or less a year to the next general election, and what we are witnessing now, most Kenyans believe this is what we are going to experience.
No, Kenyans are better than that, I can assure you.
Those concerns are not valid?
I don't expect that because, one, when you have got a simultaneous exercise across the country, then there's no polarity. But when you have one single constituency like is in Kalou, then there's bound to be focus on one electoral area. But when you're talking of so many elections going on at the same time, then there's no adversarial effect. And I think people have come a long way. Our electoral system has evolved. Our democracy has grown. And I think the average Kenyan will wake up, vote, and wait for the votes to be counted, and the winners declared.
You've already seen Rigathi Gachagua already complaining 15 points about how meetings were held, plans to have double voting, voters being given 2 ballot papers and all these things. Do you see this as just the usual crying wolf by different political players, or do you think that this is something that is serious enough to be investigated?
In the Moli, electoral contests are not bridal parties. You don't expect when the players are meeting to have easy discussions. I also don't expect the former deputy president to clap and praise anyone in this contest because he is on the spot. I have a feeling that he may have sensed that his party may not perform as well as is expected. And so he's simply crying wolf ahead of the announcement. This is my feeling.
Okay. What about the kind of government action you've seen in Kalou over the past 2 weeks? CSs, PSs descending on this one constituency, dishing out goodies, of course, in the name of conducting government programs, but which come out as inducement. What do you make of that? If at all it was in Naribari Masaba and the government or your opponent, probably if you are not on that side, did the same, what would that mean for you?
Again, Fred, we've been there before. No amount of inducement or quote-unquote bribery can change the ultimate decision or wishes of a voter. Don't forget that when you go into that ballot box, you are alone. And it's a secret ballot. It happened in Kipipiri before, during the era of former President Moi. And it has happened in many other places. So this apparent inducements or whatever will never affect the ultimate decision of a reasonable voter.
You saw probably the InfoTrack polls or the results of the InfoTrack polls yesterday. placing President William Ruto at 32%, which is a huge reduction from what he had in 2022 when he won the election. Do you feel that this, the results of the Ol Kalou by-election would, or rather hold such great magnitude for William Ruto ahead of 2027?
You know, Fred, before the Mbeere North by-election, that was a discussion. And at that time, everyone thought that the United Democratic Alliance would lose that election. Mm-hmm. But when the election results were announced and the UDA had retained the seat, or Kenya Kwanza retained the seat, mm-hmm. it fizzled out. The same story here. We've been there before. The outcome of this election has no bearing to anything happening 1 year down the line. Mm-hmm. Don't forget that the elections are not tomorrow. There will be realignments. There will be new coalitions built. Some of those people who are polled will not even be on the ballot. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very theoretical poll in my assessment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And anything could change in 1 year.
Mm-hmm. So we still have time.
We still have lots of time.
Okay. But there's one thing that has remained constant over the past 1 year, and it's the use of militia, or now the teams we call goons in political contests. And in this by-election, it's not any different. We've seen attacks, or even on your colleagues, elected members. Kanini Kega, the Iala MP, was accosted. We've seen other attacks by other people against political teams. Do you think that this trend, because it's been quoted in this Kofi Annan report, and we'll come to discuss that, do you think that that trend signifies what we will see next year?
First, I think, in my honest opinion, I wish to condemn any such trends where people use militia or young people on account of having political relevance. But then again, we saw in whatever form they come, yes. And to the best of my recollection, every election has had similar young people surrounding political players. And the main reason is that some of these young people are looking for a way to live. I think it is us who need to give them a decent livelihood. Because I guess if they had alternative ways of survival, they wouldn't follow politicians. But it's something that we must condemn. It's something that we must ensure that we change the tide. And here, the responsibility ultimately squarely lies with the inaction of the police. And these young people didn't come yesterday. If you remember, even during the protests that we had about the Finance Bill 2024, there emerged such groups who were countering the peaceful protesters. And so it is squarely incumbent upon the National Police Service to ensure that these people are dealt with.
With the kind of inaction that you talk about from the police, do you see this trend being reversed? You've said that a year is long enough that a lot of things will change. Do you think that is the one thing that is one of the things?
It can easily be reversed. It can easily be reversed if the police put their foot down.
Mm-hmm. So far they haven't, and yesterday I think most of the dailies basically were all criticizing police inaction or inaction by the leadership of the country, including the CS. One of the papers, I think the People Daily, even went as far as criticizing the inaction of the head of state. Allow me to welcome onto the set Harrison Kenyanjui, advocate of the High Court. Karibu sana wakili. It's good to have you this morning.
Thank you very much.
And we're just considering the few hours remaining before the people of Ol Kalou go to the polls in this much anticipated by-election. And we've had a story, the former deputy president, the party leader of DCP, which is one of the participants in the poll. There are 9 candidates. I know, there are 9 candidates in Ol Kalou, but we keep talking about probably 2 or 3. But either way, there are 9 candidates on the ballot tomorrow. It's claims of rigging, claims of voter bribery, threats by the IBC chairperson to even delay or postpone the election because of all this malpractice. Everything that we were hoping not to see in and around an election or a by-election, we're witnessing now. And it's only hours away. The level of violence is increasing. And we're just wondering, are we doing the right thing going into these polls this way?
Well, thank you very much. The enfranchisement rights of every Kenyan, the right to vote, is entrenched in the Constitution. You can't take that away from the Kenyan people. Against that, we have politicians that are entrenched into this political paradigm of the extension of their stay in power. And very unfortunately, what is happening now is a replication of exactly to the T happened in the period preceding the 2007 electoral period. If you look at the Kriegler-Wacke report, specifically if you look at page 2 delineates word for word what is happening. Mm-hmm. You have it at it?
Unfortunately, I don't.
It would be, and I would advise the IEBC commissioners and the secretariat to just burn the midnight oil going through that report once more. Everything that is delineated there about the ECK, the Electoral Commission of Kenya at that period, which was led by Honorable Kivuitu, it is exactly as happening. Everything, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, E, F, that page 2, it is exactly as happening. Now, did we not learn any lessons from the year 2007 electoral period? Could you blame the Kenyan people for now going to all Kalou, an outlier, quote unquote, constituency, but whose significance is so dire to the political class that is in power today? It's the same thing. Because in 2007, the common denominator that happened then and is happening or exemplifying itself is William Ruto. By whichever metric, and from whichever angle that you look at this, you will see the same pattern going on. The decimation of the authority of the Electoral Commission, the use of state resources, that is what is stated there. That you have laws that are not enforced, and you have the Electoral Code of Conduct, which is not enforced. Look at section 26, for instance, of the Elections Act. It says that any person that is involved in the fundraising 8 months before the general election, or if it is an election like this now, a by-election, you stand disqualified. There is an honorable MP called Gekaria who openly stated that I've used 1.2 million in this by-election to bribe voters. Well, we saw that yesterday the ECK said that you are slapped with a fine of 2.5, and his lawyer says he doesn't show up. He doesn't have the courtesy to show up. And yet, the quasi-judicial powers of the Electoral Commission empower them over and above this recommendation they make to the DPP. You know, we want you to prosecute this person. You know, we would like to impose this fine. His lawyer, and he doesn't show up. His lawyer says, with respect to him, well, I would like a copy of these proceedings so that we can inform our clients of his rights in law. His rights in law, of course, but you're bribing voters. The 2007 post-election violence, and you are right, because I heard you say that 84% of the prediction by the this foreign NGO saying that there's an 84 point, is it 84 point something? 0.1% chance of the replication of the post-election violence happening. Look at what happened in Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, just the other day. And we had Gbagbo, who was barred by the ICC, convicted by the ICC, and then he was barred by the Electoral Commission of that country. And his supporters felt that our politician, the person who should be carrying our dream, is not on the ballot, and therefore there was violence. And the sad bit is that there was an outcome that, notwithstanding the violence, that was upheld. So going to the 2007 general election, what is happening now in Kalou is very unsettling. Very unsettling because you cannot have these police officers who go to populate a mere constituency there. I mean, you have all these police officers, and the Inspector General of Police tells us we will have these police officers manning these polling stations, and we do have on standby the water cannons. Or, I mean, do you expect that in this by-election? Are you not creating an atmosphere of apprehension and fear among the electorate? Are you, according to the DCP's leader, saying that there are these schemes between the IEBC officials and the state or UDA officials? Are you telling us, in a nutshell, you in government and the Electoral Commission, that you have absolutely no faith in conducting a free and fair election in Kalou, and that is why you're using these quote-unquote security forces as a backup? But they operate, they flip that argument. They operate to create this atmosphere of apprehension among the voters.
Do you suspect or anticipate voter suppression or a reduced voter turnout tomorrow?
Yes. On two scores.
Because of the security, enhanced security in the area?
On two scores. And allow me to say this with tremendous respect. I'm not a voter there, but observing from what's going on, and as against the legal background, and as I've said, the Electoral Code of Conduct, the Elections Act itself, the Elections General Regulations of 2017 that were subsequently amended, they provide such a robust legal framework for the government, for the police, and for the Electoral Commission to ensure that we have a free and fair election. For instance, you are entitled under the elections general regulations to have two agents, one who is in the tallying and one who is in the ensuring that the voting goes on. Very well, you're entitled to that. But I heard the the Electoral Commission say that you are entitled to only one agent. How is that? So the Electoral Commission is itself feeling this state of affairs where you have volatility that is likely to erupt. What if you have now an imbalance? Because you have 9 candidates. What if you have a UDA, the UDA candidate, having more agents than, for instance, DCP? What will happen in the end? What happens if you have police officers and the regulations entitle you to 2 police officers for every polling station, 2 police officers who should be uniformed, So suppose you have police officers that are not uniformed and they are manning those stations. And suppose, peradventure, you have an altercation that erupts into a state, of disrupting the election, the voting process. What happens? Is that a spark to ignite violence, by reason of which then you should, call off the election? The apprehensions expressed by the DCP political party are legitimate, in my view.
Okay.
Because, and going against the background of the Electoral Commission saying, we will postpone this election. Excuse me. And Meshimiwa here has said, that was premature. I mean, how do you go on the podium and begin saying that you haven't witnessed this? You do not have intelligence report telling you that this political party or that political party will and has a potential of doing so. This idea of goons is exactly what happened. And I beg that the Kenyan people have a look again, re-look at that Waki report.
Right.
Because it is a blueprint, as it were, of the scenario that we are witnessing.
And we'll come to that conversation based on this report by the Kofi Annan Foundation. Yes, the IEBC and the Police Inspector General said there will be at least 1,000 police officers in and around Kalou constituency to man the by-elections of tomorrow, only hours before people in Kalou go to the polls. After the break, we'll be looking at this report by the Kofi Annan Foundation and what it means for us heading towards 2027 general elections. You're watching TV47 Breakfast.
Sundays at 8:30 p.m.
Good morning.
You have my rent?
Leo jioni kama tutakuwa tumelipa rent nauza hii simu yako.
Hamna pesa. I need 3 G's to make my nails today.
Sasa hivi natuhusu aje?
Can I order now? Do you ship? Can I get blinking ones?
Mimi nilikuwa na trade. Nimewekelea kitele yangu. Kitele yangu na trade. Nikikunyuma.
Oh my God. He left me. Nitumie ni line.
Uko nje kuna wifi.
Why? High five?
Wait, so what do we call this dish again?
I have no idea.
The cucumbers are there specifically for my beauty routine.
Tamulini kero umeka kwa beauty product.
Na ameenda.
Tunafaa tukuwe na logo yetu. Like, si ni brand already.
We won't entertain divas. No. I'm not dealing with a man child.
Amazing. Nishapenda hii energy.
Sundays at 8:30 p.m. on TV47. Saturday at 8:30 p.m.
My father used to tell me that our hotel is the home for travelers. I guess I forgot that. Recently, it's been more of a mirror of my own ambition. Ooh, yeah. We might fail. We will probably fail, but not for a lack of trying. So for the last time, and the first time, welcome to Connect In, the best experience in Eastern Central Africa and its environs.
Saturday at 8:30 p.m. on TV47. Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m.
This is a very serious place.
Nairobi, where the hustle never sleeps and neither do the scammers.
Link Up, we are talking about something that's affecting all of us. We are talking trust.
We're diving into the campus life.
Stay fresh, stay safe.
Stay linked up.
Even as we continue counting down the hours to 6 a.m., 16th of July 2026, when the polls open in Kalou, we have a big warning on the front page of most dailies today. Daily Nation goes with a recipe for chaos. It quotes the same report from the Kofi Annan Foundation. 2027 violence alert. That's the main headline on the front page of the Daily Nation. The Standard has made a comparison between what's happening tomorrow with the by-elections and what has been happening the past few weeks with what could happen, still based on this report. IBC promises a credible poll. An international report warns Kenya faces an 84.1% likelihood of electoral violence next year, not even just tomorrow. Taifa Leo, kuna shida, mbele kuna shida, ni ripoti. 20 years later, after witnessing what we did in 2007 and the number of people who died and cracks that are yet to be repaired and people who are still grieving their loved ones. We have a real problem this time around. And this comes from the Kofi Annan report. It has been covered extensively on the Daily Nation, pages 4, 5, 6, and 7. And on this list, so they say less than a year before Kenya goes to the ballot, a convergence of political, economic, and institutional fault lines is raising fresh fears that the country could once again be heading towards electoral unrest. A new report by the Kofi Annan Foundation estimates an 81.6% probability of election-related violence during 2027 general election, warning that while Kenya has made significant democratic gains since 2007, post-election crisis, many of the underlying triggers of conflict remain unsolved. So the report warns of a dangerous combination of rising political intolerance, ethnic mobilization, economic hardship, youth frustration, weak public trust in institutions, and increasing use of goons in politics, which is creating a recipe for chaos. And on this list, they said we're among 10 most likely to have violence. We're only second to Nigeria, according to this risk index. Other countries that are better than us: Mongolia, Guatemala, Gambia, Armenia. We're only worse than Nigeria. That's what we want to discuss right now. Bwana Manduku, this is worrying. Anyone who was there in 2007 would never wish for a repeat of this. Yet we're hurtling down this road so fast, heading towards that direction. You say something could change within a year. What would it take for us to reverse this trend that we've taken?
Fred, it's quite unfortunate when our beautiful country, Kenya, is ranked with countries like Fiji, Mongolia, Guatemala. Where is that even, you know? Mm-hmm. But then we need to go back in history. And I like what my friend, Wakili Harrison, has said, that when we had the unfortunate incident in the year 2007 and had widespread political violence arising out of the disputed general election, various commissions were formed. And if you read the Kriegler report, in as much as we tried to comply with the recommendations that the report made, I still believe this is one agenda that we never resolved. I think it is famously referred to as agenda number 4. That in all this, there has been underlying issues that we've never really taken time to resolve. We want to avoid talking about the elephant in the room. And they revolve around historical injustices. Even as we prepare for the next election, I think it is incumbent upon us to start by first implementing the NADCO report, because bits of it try and address those injustices. Mm-hmm. And why we normally have political violence is normally centered around things like exclusion, historical land injustices, economic deprivation. Those are the main underlying factors that we should address first. They only simmer up, or they only show themselves in political violence because then other channels are deemed not to be working. As a country, we must seriously address the issue of exclusion. We must address the issue of youth empowerment.
When we say we must address, because when we promulgated the new constitution, there was a raft of commissions that were intended to remedy whatever the Agenda 4 was looking to remedy. This is 15 years later. We still have the same problems.
We still have not resolved most of the problems that we ought to have resolved. And it boils down to just one factor: political goodwill. If there's political goodwill in every sector, by all players, myself included, then there can be no violence. In fact, sometimes it takes just 2 people to say, stop it. 2 or 3 people in this country say, stop this, and it will stop. And that's why I'm not so worried, because I think there'll be a meeting of the minds. And I wish that my colleagues read this report and digest it. And the objective in how to solve the problem, because the report also gives recommendations or way forward. Otherwise, we can talk until tomorrow, but...
You suggested that there are 2 people who could just come out and say stop, and it stops.
Oh yes, that's how Kenya works.
Which are these people?
You can guess who these are.
Don't be afraid.
Their names cannot be mentioned.
Well, it normally takes two players in everything in this country to resolve these things.
The biggest political rivals?
Normally the big political players. They can just say, you guys stop this. And that's how, unfortunately, this country works.
Well, Wakili, this is worrying. And anyone who has read, because there's a whole generation that was not there in 2007, but they must have read or come across some literature on what happened. And it's a real worry when we start seeing these international reports saying this, that next year the likelihood is 84% is huge. 8 out of 10, it means it will happen. Then we say that 2 people or 3 people can say stop and stop it. Shouldn't that be our focus right now? Someone who can actually bring this to a stop or reverse this trajectory?
It should be. Thank you. It should be. Just like Mishmoa said, the lack of political goodwill is what has decimated any traction that the independence of these commissions would have had as envisaged in that Kriegler-Waki report, post-election report. And the idea that the behemoth, the institution of government, is out there to serve the politician. And you heard a politician in Kisumu, I believe, who took to the podium and say, well, you see, we were outside government, but now we are in government. It is time for us, as it were, to use the euphemism, to eat. And it's very unfortunate because we have a 5-year electoral cycle. And that electoral cycle affords every Kenyan, in congregation with their compatriots, the opportunity then to see the leadership that they want to have for the coming 5-year cycle. Now, you find that those who use state resources, and you will see in that Kriegler report, that there was an endemic use of state resources in order to entrench a political class that was feeling this. The open goonism then is exactly what is happening now. So if there was political goodwill to ensure that the electoral climate that we are getting into, exemplified by this Kalou by-election, is a healthy environment for everybody to express themselves. Now, if I was to look at this, for instance, it is just a report. This is a newspaper report. This is not my assessment that UDA has fallen to 9% in terms of popularity in Central. Now, UDA may not accept this sort of verdict from the public, but it is the truth. And so in order to defy this truth, as it were, they would like to employ this forceful acceptance by way of voter bribery. That's what happened in 2007. Is there goodwill to get rid of that? If we saw this happen in Bere, and the Electoral Commission did absolutely nothing, and I quoted Section 26 of the Elections Act, which says that any politician, any person who is involved in such fundraising then becomes disqualified for such an election. Well, subsection 2 of that section of the Elections Act does say that, well, the person who is in it is not disqualified because they are fundraising for purposes of that election. So the IEBC did absolutely nothing in Bere North, in Malava constituency. For what reason did they fail to exercise their statutory rights? To bring to heel, to stop this sort of pollution of the electoral process that would impinge, take away from the purity of the electoral process and therefore distort the outcome in a manner that does not express the will of the people of Bere North, for instance. It was replicated in Malava constituency. The degree of violence that we saw and these goons that were hired, what then can I say other than this institution called the IEBC is funded, has the ability then to make reports to the National Assembly. They went to the National Assembly. I believe, Meshmiwa, you probably did have an opportunity to interrogate them. And they would then have taken that opportunity to say that, look, we are handicapped in terms of A or B or C, D, in terms of containing the violence. we are unable to do A, B, or C, D about the political parties themselves. But yet you see the Elections Act brings in the players who are involved in the electoral process in a manner that also takes accountability to every wing of those players. The office of the political parties, for instance, is still roped in there in the Elections Act. And they are supposed, for instance, to provide the list of the political party members. Because if you're going to vote, for instance, you should be registered as a voter. Whose responsibility is that? Is the IEBC. Now, the moment that I saw the chair of the Mr. Ethicon then saying that and he was reminding people of All Kalou, you must be having a valid ID or a valid passport. That is the law. That's the obligation of the IEBC to ensure that. But who issues an ID? The ID is the role of the executive. And who ensures that it is a valid ID? So I may be wrong to assume that this All Kalou election will result in a whole swath of voters being barred for whatever reason. That, look, your ID is not valid, or your ID does not tally with what we have here. Which brings another issue. Shouldn't the IEBC have engaged in voter education early enough so that it tells these voters that, look, you need to examine the register so that your name is confirmed as appears in your ID is exactly as is in the role of the voters in this polling station. And they said, oh, we have emblazoned the list of the voters in these particular polling stations. But to wrap up that, the IEBC, in my humble view, appears to have wholly abdicated its constitutional and statutory obligations, allow the political class to play out in a manner never seen before. Because if you can have votes being taken to All Kalou at this period, I mean, you can't be blind to tell me that, these are state officers and therefore they're entitled to go but why now? Why didn't you do it before?
Okay.
How is it that you're doing it now? So the Kenyan people are slowly seeing the erosion of their faith in these institutions. And as I close, the NCIC, for instance, they are supposed to integrate the Kenyan people. Even the name itself, the National Integration and Cohesion Commission. What prosecutions have they successfully made of these who are engaged in hate speech or speech that is divisive?
Yes, and if we could focus on now Chapter 15, because that's what I was looking for.
Yes.
Which establishes all these commissions, including IEBC. This was supposed to be the remedy, because you've raised issues about things that affected Kenyans prior. What happened in 2007, we'll say happened while we had the other constitution. Now we came with a new constitution, and one of the biggest reasons we had that constitution was to remedy whatever was wrong prior to 2007, which could have led to the events. And one of those is establishment of commissions and independent offices, including National Police Service, including the National Land Commission, including the Kenya National Human Rights and Equality Commission, and the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, which we focus a lot on. Yeah, that these are independent and not controlled by anyone or two people, as you say. So where do these two people or three people, or even one person, come in, if at all the Constitution is very clear on the independence of these commissions that were supposed to address different problems that still converge into one?
Good question. I think if I was asked, the one remedy that I would propose in order to further give the commissions some autonomy is a very independent budget line. Ultimately, these commissions come to Parliament for budgetary allocation. By law and by the Constitution, Parliament has the powers to allocate budget. More often than not, we've had some of the commissions saying that they don't have adequate budgetary provisions to enforce their mandate. I think it is one area that needs to be relooked at. You've seen when the new president came into office, one of the things he ensured was to make the National Police Service have its own quote-unquote accounting officer. I think that is one way to try and cure some of these problems. I can assure you that these commissions hardly get half of what they require for their operation expenses.
Even the National Police Service?
Yes, I can assure you that they never get what they actually need. The second thing I think is, if you look at the way some of these commissions select their members, theoretically it works. Or pick up selection panel, then the selection panel will advertise, interview, shortlist. That route doesn't seem to provide, in my own assessment, the best people. There's something that needs to be, again, relooked at. Because you ask yourself, why do we still have issues with the National Land Commission? Even when its commissioners are transparently selected. So it boils down again to lack of clear independence, either through selection or through budget.
So there's no independence even in the in IEBC. Is that what we are saying? That the independence in this Chapter 15 commissions is non-existent?
It's called the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So
only the one.
what else do you expect? It's very independent.
In fact, it's the only commission here with the word independent. The rest are not talking about independence. But are we saying that the problem is actually documented in our constitution? That we have this big problem in Kenya, and you've very well articulated the shortcomings of the IEBC in their conduct. Yet this is an independent commission. But listening to Mheshimiwa, you would say there's no independence here, apart from the one word independent in the IEBC.
Thank you. Let's not play around with words. Semantics and phonetics can be very deceptive. But we look at the substance of it. The IEBC's commissioner's appointment, the chair himself has had aspersions cast on him because of his connection with State House and State House operatives. I think it is the burden of a commission or the commissioners that are mentioned in such a scenario to dispel any notion that, look, if you have this idea or entertain the notion that I could be somewhat affiliated to State House, or that I am an agent, an emissary, or a puppet of State House, I want to disabuse you of that notion by A, B, or C, or D. They don't come out to say that. Rather, we see the aggregate of their conduct in sum over a span of time. That whole spectrum portrays an IEBC that is not independent. What do I mean? There were questions that they raised in Parliament about the procurement of these kits for conducting the biometrics during the election. And then you hear this idea that the person behind the procurement is connected. As a murmur. Yes, as a murmur. But as Caesar's wife, they say, euphemistically, they ought not to have any suspicion of, such a thing. You shouldn't have a blot. So the independence part of the IEBC in the public eye is not there, is lacking. And whatever that is required, in my view, to reinforce the perception of independence is being whittled as we go by day. You find the UDA, being the Kenya Kwanza government political party, is engaged in this display of opulence. And again, I invite the IEBC commissioners and the Secretariat to dust off that Krigilawaki report. In extenso, they said extensively. They said the use of state resources during an election period should be curbed, contained, checked by the IEBC in order not to flip the table, make it a level playing field for every player in the electoral field. The independence of the IEBC, if it were there present, is what would have stemmed that display of opulence in all Kalou, as we saw. Now, there is another dimension which is very injurious to the fairness aspect and the transparency aspect of an election, such as happened in Mbeere North. The Mbeere people are lamenting today that, look, we received some transformers for electric supply to our area before the election. And now after the election, now we have these transformers taken away from us. They do not land in Kitutu Masaba. They do not land in Kwale or in Turkana. They land in an area that is similarly, in a similar fashion, about to get into a by-election, all Kalou. Now, it is very clear to anybody who's observant in that the installation of those electric transformers in Mbeere North was an inducement, a flipping of the the tables, as it were, and there was no level playing field for someone who was not. So where is the independence of the IEBC here?
Allow me to note that the Kenya Power Company has already denied this and said the transformers are back in Mbeere North, whether or not it's true.
Back, Fred? Meaning that they were taken in the first instance?
Yes.
It's a shame to Kenya Power. It's a shame.
They said it was for normal repairs.
Okay, so fine. Let's
but then the return.
Give them that. But, and however, and this is what I'm saying, the murmurs, if they occur and if they are actually expressed in such a manner, there is the independence of the IEBC, because the IEBC is empowered under the Elections Act to summon anyone includes the Kenya Power. And we ask, hey, wait, you're a governor in Meru, you're a governor in Kirinyaga, what are you doing as a state officer in All Kalou? What are you doing there as a PS? And I was here with you when I was saying, again, look at the Conflict of Interest Act, which now says that, you can have a cabinet secretary go out there and campaign for someone in the political party affiliation. So your question about the independence of the IEBC is very worrisome, because now when you come to the 2027 electoral period, where the fate of this country's leadership is to be determined for the next 5 years, is very dire. It is very dire, because these by-elections, in my view, were not only for me the testing ground for the IEBC, for them now to get off the teething problems that they may have had as a commission, but also the opportunity for them to display and demonstrate their independence. But when you have Ethicon surrounded by his commissioners coming out there and, in a very feeble way, trying to say, okay, we'll conduct the elections. They have backtracked on the, early expression. We could call off the election.
Right. I'm looking at Article 249 of the Constitution, still Chapter 15 on the commissions, on the authority of the commission, because objects, authority, and funding of commissions and independent offices. The objects of the commission and the independent offices are to A, protect sovereignty of the people, secure the observance by all state organs of democratic values and principles, and C, promote constitutionalism. The commissions and the holders of independent offices are subject only to this Constitution and the law, and B, are independent and not subject to direction or control by any person or authority. These are the provisions of our Constitution. Are we saying this document is failing? Or what exactly is the problem here? We cannot trust the National Police Service Commission. We cannot trust the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. We cannot trust
National Land Commission.
The National Land Commission. We are not confident in the Kenya National Human Rights and Equality Commission. Then what are we saying? Why do we need this Constitution
then? Fred, from where I sit, it is not that we cannot trust them. It is them who have given Kenyans reasons not to trust them.
All of them collectively?
Some of them. And that is why there's all this noise. If everything was working as per the letter that you've read and the spirit of the Constitution, then we would not be having the chairman of the Electoral Commission going on TV and complaining, because he has got all the powers under that Constitution. If that word you read is actually what these commissions abide by, then you'll not be having the National Police Service looking the other way when we have got serious breaches.
We would not be having a report saying that we have 84%
and so it is just based on the reason they've given Kenyans to lose faith in them. They have created a trust deficit themselves. And so we must relook at that.
If the structure is failing, and this is the law of the land, if the structure is failing, where do you get the confidence that something will turn around in the next 1 year? We're already worried. We're seeing the violence. We're seeing the voter bribery, open defiance, open breaking of the law, electoral malpractices. We're already seeing all these things that we were hoping we will never witness around an election. Then where do you get the confidence that it will change?
I've always said, Fred, and I'm on record as saying that it is us Kenyans who will take care of ourselves.
But how? Kenyans have never taken care of themselves.
Going by the last election, which was supposed to be a very high-stake election, the election of the year 2022, Kenyans conducted themselves in a civil manner, largely. There were very minimal incidents or flare-ups or electoral violence. I still believe that come 2027, because the focus will not be on Kalou or Mbere North or Emura Dikir, the focus will be your local polling station where you vote, and that there'll be a division because it will be all across the 57,000 polling stations in the country.
But
it is not likely that you can have polarity.
Forget about polarity, but when it comes to goons, in every political contest, this will just replicate in every constituency, even in Yaribari Masaba, that you and your rival will see the need or necessity to have a small militia to protect each one of you. That, according to the report by Kofi Annan, is part of what will lead to the violence, these small militias that are there. So that is easily replicated across all the 290 constituencies.
What I said earlier, and I want to repeat, is that on that aspect, I think the National Police Service, even if people have no faith in it, should show some minimal force. They should step up their game, minimally, so that we can eradicate this menace once and for all, or discourage the establishment of militias or growth of the goon culture.
Do you believe that there's a willingness to do that by the police service itself? We've seen instances where, like in the case in Kisumu the other day, that
Fred, I told you,
police officers were walking hand in hand with the same goons who were armed.
Fred, I told you, this needs political goodwill.
So
the two guys.
The two guys who still remain unnamed.
Yeah, they should just say stop this, and it will stop.
Wakili, because we're looking for leadership, what can turn this around? This report says 84% chance, 8 out of 10. We're going to fight. There'll be violence. We're looking for a possible turnaround. We have a document that we call the Constitution of Kenya that now we are saying we cannot rely on. Chapter 15, commissions are more or less not helpful in this situation. Then how do we do it? Or do you believe that we still have to go to the two people who remained unnamed?
Fred, thank you. It's rather unfortunate because in the commissions themselves, there is reposed in Kenyans the hope that they will rise to the occasion. You're being paid through the taxpayers' money. Why are you receiving that money? How do you find sleep at 3 a.m.? You know, and you haven't executed your responsibility because you fear the big man. You fear the person. And if you're a Christian and you're saying that you're going to heaven, let me just warn you. Let me just tell you. God tells you that you will go to hell if you are afraid. Because he does say that the fearful, the adulterers, the murderers, they were cast into hell. So please don't fool yourself in saying that, this is a public institution and therefore, I got a call. You got a call from who? It's the Kenyan people that have employed you. It is not that person seated in State House. And besides, that is an employee of the Kenyan people. He will shift or move from there if the Kenyan people elect not to have him there for the 5-year term period. So you as a commissioner, you as a member of that commission are failing the Kenyan people, and you have no responsibility being there because you then are owing your allegiance to someone. To say that someone is likely to do A, B, or C, what will he do to you? If you as a commission sit together and decide this is the constitution, this is the law, it binds us. For instance, the National Land Commission is tasked with ensuring that there is compensation for the acquisition of public land under the Land Act, Section 117, 118, 119, and the National Land Commission Act itself, and the Constitution. And then compensation comes about because the SGR is supposed to pass through Honorable Manduku's land. And then Honorable Manduku calls the chair of the commission, tells him, hey, you have to remember this is my land, and therefore, instead of the valuation being 2.5 million per acre, make it 25 million. Look, the National Land Commission is supposed to say, we have our own valuers. We are bound by the law, and we are supposed to give you the market value for compensation. But what's happening? It's not that way. We hear that, land has been bought up, at cheap prices and compensation will happen. The National Land Commission has not lived up to the expectation of the Kenyan people because it is the taxpayer that then ends up coughing that money, goes to enrich some person because they have failed to live up to the expectation. Come to the IEBC because you ask, between now and then, what we're supposed to change? What will morph into, a clean election, an independent IEBC? In my humble view, nothing. It will only deteriorate. It's going to get worse. Why? Because these people have shown themselves. They are easy to succumb to any sort of pressure from so-called, up above, high up. The Inspector General of Police is the one who's supposed to oversee his police force and ensure that the police force, the members of the police force, who I respect largely because you see of their faithfulness to, serve in the police force. Many of those police officers, look at the traffic officers, for instance. I really pity some of them. They're in the traffic, it is raining, and you have these indisciplined Kenyan people who are drivers. And what happens? The police expect that the NTSA has, licensed those driving schools that will only allow drivers who have graduated in driving schools to be on the road. But what happens? These police officers have to control traffic with, caused by drivers. Who you have to ask yourself, at a very basic level, do you know that you are supposed, under Rule 75 of the traffic rules, to keep left unless overtaking? So what's going to happen? So now the police force, because you ask Mheshimiwa here, how about the police force? I pity them also, because you're supposed to have the motorbike, the rider, who's supposed to be manning traffic as we go along. Look at the Thika Superhighway. How many of them do we have? On any given day, at any given time, riding along the the highway to regulate the traffic, to ensure that traffic, you keep left so that traffic can flow. So we are saying that those institutions have these gamut of failures, and we are seeing the reflection of that. And you ask, now between now and 2027, do we have sufficient time, A, to reform this institution, B, to inculcate values, for instance, patriotism, that you do not give a foreign company that is owned by a foreigner your digital information, your data, and then is supposed to be operating the biometrics for your own country. In this day and age, we are supposed to be having our own technical expertise in ITs that we can man and operate. But is the IEBC, for instance, because that's the focus of your question, likely to change 2027? No. Is it likely to exemplify more independence between now and 2027? No. Why? As Mheshimiwa said, I'm going to name the names. The president is failing this country by trying to micromanage every other institution so that he can entrench himself. And he's so afraid, morbid fear Morbid fear, not just fear, morbid fear. And then probably he dreams these nightmares of him being a one-term president. That expression by itself frightens and scares him. That he has to, micromanage. Who is not for my two-term? And why do that? Unfortunately, I'm afraid.
Who's the second person? Who's the second person? You've named one.
Can you name the second person?
He
said the president is...
No, I helped him. I helped him.
Wakili here is trying to put words in my mouth.
But I take responsibility for saying the president.
I have a mouth. Eh?
They will remain unnamed.
But you see, that is figurative. This is what I'm saying.
No, for me, it's not figurative.
Figurative, That it takes two to tango. And when you see any form of disalignment, normally, the players are just at the apex, 2, 3, and even in my constituency, it works like that. I mean, if I say something, probably 50-60% of the people will listen, and so it is normal that when you have the big political players, when something needs political goodwill, it is the big political players who will just come in and quell it. You
can make that. You can decipher from that.
Yeah. So
the two people.
And it's very simple. It's a very simple thing, in my opinion. Yeah.
Back to the Kofi Annan Foundation report, they introduce a new angle to the list of happenings that could trigger violence, and this probably will allow me to go back to the InfoTrack poll yesterday. That the president has an approval rating of 32%, and his rivals, the closest I think has 13%, the rest have 12%, meaning that there could be a possibility of a runoff, that no single candidate will win 50% plus one in the first instance. And the period between the first election and the runoff, according to this report, could also trigger some form of violence. Do you agree? Do you foresee this? If at all it happens, it will be the very first time that Kenya is experiencing.
Fred, I am a very good student of history, and I am a very good person in data analysis. As a matter of fact, I have done research up to PhD level. We have been here before. In fact, since the year 1992, there is no single poll in this country that has placed the president at beyond 40%. Even when we had the grand coalition government between the year 2008 and 2013, opinion polls consistently ranked the late Raila Odinga, Uhuru Kenyatta, highly, but none of them ever surpassed the 40% mark. There's no midterm opinion poll anywhere in the world that has placed a sitting head of state at anywhere near 50%. Whether it is in the United States of America, whether it is in the UK, and even here at home in Kenya. It is not possible that during your term in office, you can be ranked at 50%. But secondly, and more importantly, our election system is based on coalitions. When they did this polling, they assumed that the incumbent President William Ruto was going to run as Dr. William Ruto. They forgot that he has room to build coalitions. In fact, if you look at the 32% rating that they have given him, and look at a similar rating they gave him in the year 2021, he's doing much better today. And he just needs to get one other member and build a broad-based coalition.
Doesn't he already have those members as it is right now? Kenya coalition, broad-based arrangement is already there.
You see, we don't know the full composition of the coalition. There will be no runoff in this country, Fred. You can write it down. This election is closed, and I want to disagree with Harrison here that this election is done and dusted. 32% is a very high rating 1 year to the election without naming your full coalition partners. Anywhere in the world, even if you go to Germany today, look at the rating that the incumbent had before he went into a coalition government. And so I want to disagree that there'll be a runoff. Okay. This election will be won round one because this rating is higher than he had in 2021.
And so no possibility of violence linked to a second round of elections?
Minimal.
Okay. Kalou, do you agree with that? That no chance of a runoff?
Thank you. I beg to differ vehemently. See, the dynamics of, okay, let me import the German experience, for instance, and the building of the coalition. The building of the coalition, I think what Mheshimiwa may have, omitted to state is that there had been these failed negotiations because they couldn't build a coalition, which also happened in Israel before there was a consensus eventually. But the margin was very thin. And you can see this pattern all over Europe, even in the Netherlands, even as recent as in Slovenia. And you can see there's a surge of this population across the world, even in the US, that is totally disenchanted with the policies, the schemes that are going on around the world, especially with the suppression of rights, human rights, the imposition of a surveillance state, and the disaffiliation of the people with policies that they have had no say in, especially in Europe, because the European Commission and the European Parliament makes laws and makes decisions that are anti-people, and they are more into technocracy, and people feel that, look, you're leaving us out. So transpose that to this country and what's going on. And let's go back 2 years ago, 2024. The Gen Z expressed what was simmering beneath the surface for the large majority of the Kenyan people. And what Mheshimiwa is seeing that the 32% allegedly of President Ruto's alleged popularity, I think that's an exaggeration, because there is this large population among Kenyans that they are very silent about their position, but they are suffering under the economic terms that the government has undertaken, and without giving audience to them, without giving them an ear. And some of them are waiting patiently for the electoral period that they can cast their vote. The only problem is that the person who is seeking re-election is a wielder of both political and economic power. And this person also has this overbearing, and should I say domineering, which I'm going to respect to him, need for him to actually be perceived as the one in control, the one steering the ship. He dare even come and tell me that, he wants me to be like in Singapore. I don't want to be like a Singaporean. We do not have palm trees, for instance, in this country. We are a different climate. And look, he may be talking about the economic scenario of Singapore and all that. But I'm saying for the coming election, we are likely to have that runoff. And I would invite him also to look at what happened also in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, again. That sort of scenario did happen. And so the runoff is likely to happen because there will be this fragmentation of the formations. And Mheshimiwa here is saying that we do not have a unified, opposition, and therefore we do not know which candidate is likely to, let's borrow a leaf, as it were, and he said he's a very good historian, of the 2022 election. And I think it was about 3 months to the main election when now the United Opposition said that we are going to support Kibaki, and they had their formations and all of that. And they triumphed Moi in a margin that Moi couldn't believe, and his acolytes couldn't believe. So likewise, the disaffection that Kenyan people have with the manner in which their lives are being taken, the expression of political force and, this flexing of political muscle, as we can see even in Kalou, it gets to a point where they will play along. Just for instance, you've seen in social media that people donning UDA caps, freely, attending those meetings. But immediately the campaign period has ended, they are just throwing those caps. But I would have advised them, please, don't throw away the cap. Go buy a bottle of Jik. Get a container, dip it. Use a cap, reuse a cap. Don't throw it away. Those economics are different. I don't know how they're. But just to answer that, personally, I believe there is likely to be a runoff. Because
even with the unity of the opposition, you don't think they are enough to marshal a 50% plus one?
We must weigh this against this driving. And this is all things, but now I have to emphasize very clearly, all things being equal, because I can't predict your health. You know, all things being equal. So if we have the presidential candidates being there, with Ruto as well there, all things being equal, then, you know, if he does wield that power, that I'd like to have a re-election, and there is that, you know, tiny or, you know, whatever swath of people that will be supporting him, feel that, look, this momentum is too huge against us, and look, we need to do something. So he may then use state resources, as they are doing in Kalou, and I'm using the microcosm exempling of Kalou as projected into 2027. What's likely to happen? And I beg the Kenyan people to pay very keen attention to what happens in Kalou, in the tallying of the votes, in the conduct of the election, in the permission of observers. And I did not hear the IEBC talk about that we have accredited these observers, including the media, that have to be there. By law, they have to be there. In the Krigler-Wake report, they say that, look, we have to have the media and we have to have the accredited observers being present in a polling station so as then to lend credibility and fairness to the election. So, going now forward, if then they are able to drive back this force, counterbalance, and somehow they are able then to, you know, have some stability, because as we go to 2027, I see the support of the government sinking, because members of the National Assembly who will be seeking re-election, when they go to the ground, and regardless of their political affiliation, find that the ground, there's a groundswell of disaffection with the government, what will they do? Mheshimiwa here is not going to say that I'm UDA, because UDA, unless they change and rebrand themselves, they will still remain UDA. Mheshimiwa will want re-election. And if UDA becomes unpopular on the ground, you can bet the presidential candidate of UDA, give or take, will be Ruto. Then, of course, you can see that the political support that he will be banking on in terms of UDA to propel him to power, being UDA, having just shrunk to that level, cannot also transpose to the president. And therefore, you're likely to have a lowering of whatever votes, and this may not translate into the opposition having a winning vote. So we are likely to have that runoff.
Okay. So according to the Kofi Annan Foundation report on the likelihood of violence, electoral violence next year, it is cited that the possibility of an election runoff could also trigger some form of violence. To what extent, we still do not know. It is a worrying trend. It is what is featuring on the front pages today. 2027 violence alert, recipe for chaos. Too little, too late. That's the assessment by the Standard of the position taken by IEBC chairperson in trying to hold to account some of the politicians who have been accused of electoral malpractice. I think even on People Daily, they also talk about same thing here. This People Daily keeps hiding. And yes, the high cost of political tokenism is a big headline on the front page of the People Daily. A lot of focus on what's happening in Kalou and what could potentially happen if at all we are to compare the by-elections in Kalou and what happens next year during the general election. Mbele kuna shida, ripoti inasema. Na watumia picha kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo ya wahuni wakikaribia wafanyakazi kule Ruiru kabla ya kuwashambulia na kuwapora. Ilikuwa ni Mei mwaka huu. Dirisha la gari la mbunge wa Yala Kanini Kega lililovunjwa na wahuni Oljororok. Wahuni wakishambulia kundi la Linda Mwananchi Keumbu Kisii mnamo Julai 3 mwaka huu. Matukio ya shambulio lilodaiwa kufanywa na wahuni St. Stephen's Anglican Cathedral kule Kisumu. Mbele kuna shida. Ndio ripoti tu. Final words, Bwana Manduku.
Thank you, Fred. I'm a bit alarmed by another report appearing on the dailies today about the impending shortage in the expected harvest. In my other life, I'm a farmer in the Rift Valley, and this report doesn't paint a very good picture given that we are going into an election year, and they say that there's prolonged dry spell, fertilizer shortage, and maize diseases in our traditional bread baskets. And the PS confirms that they are carrying out an assessment in order to assess the amount of grain that the country will import. In all honesty, I don't think we should go back there, because last year we harvested about 70 million bags of maize in this country. And I wish that our farmers in the Rift Valley are not affected by this excuse to import maize and render their harvests useless on account of predictions of a fall in the traditional harvest.
Right. That story is on page 1, page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation. Alarm as drought hits Kenya's food basket. Thank you for that, Bwana Manduku. Finally, Wakili.
Thank you very much, Fred. In today's Daily Nation, the Standard at page 6. And at page 6, there's a story there about Kenya faces the 84%, what you are talking about. And right there on the middle column, you will see there the IEBC is reported that the IEBC regretted that the presence of goons had led to security threats such as disruption at tallying centers, in polling stations, which is what you are referencing, attacks on members of the public, voters, polling officials such as in Mbeere North, Malava, Narok Town, and in some instances leading to killings such as in the case of Pondo area of Kasipul, where 2 people died. Now look, they're talking about goons. Section 78 of the Penal Code criminalizes such goons. Is it the responsibility of the Kenyan person, the individual, the citizen who has ceded the power, the authority, and the right of the police to enforce and ensure that the laws are adhered to, and in such political affiliations such as UDA or DCP or whatever it is, that you do not have the sponsoring of goons or the giving them of the platform? That is a failure on the part of the police force. That is a failure on the part of the ODPP's office. Because you cannot tell me that these are faceless people, or that they fly from Mars, or they fly from wherever, they come in and commit their crimes and go back. And it was a laughing stock of the CS for Interior to say that, some goons have come and attacked, and they are gone to Uganda. We are tracing them, I mean, that sort of storytelling ought to stop. We are seeing a failure in the institutions that ought to be enforcing the law. And when I was here last, and I say Section 3, Subsection 3 of the Public Order Act says that the responsibility lies with the Honorable Attorney General to file a case in court using the report now from the Inspector General of Police and say that we have these patterns of political violence through goons. Now, coming to what Mheshimiwa has said here about the likelihood of crop failure. Crop failure, they have never investigated in the National Assembly this idea that you see an airplane flying and spraying chemicals to us in the name of climate change. I mean, that ought to be investigated and that ought to stop. This is what is costing us. Warfare has mutated from the wielding of guns and bombs to these so-called technological advances. And we have ceded our airspace to these, foreign corporations, foreign entities that have an agenda. And, people are not inquiring or asking. Catch your eyes up one of these days and you find a cloud formation that is not natural. It is because it is toxic and that chemical just comes down, excuse me, and causes what it is. Why? Because when you lack food, you go begging for food from them. And their food, they know they have laced with toxic chemicals. Yeah. So as then to attack it. I mean, warfare has mutated.
Thank you, Wakili. Wakili Harrison Kinyanjui, asante sana for your time at TV47. And Daniel Manduku, MP Nyaribari Masaba, as we look at these rather worrying headlines on the possibility of electoral violence next year. This is according to a report by the Kofi Annan Foundation. And it is worrying, and the question has been, what can we do to reverse this trajectory? Well, that has been State of the Nation. After the break, we'll discuss matters aviation. What exactly is affecting our aviation industry in Kenya today? Is there something that can be done? We'll be having George Odwor, Head of Scheduled Services at Fly 748 with us in studio. See you after the break.